Cultural intelligence. The ability to work effectively across cultures isn't just a nice to have anymore. In today's connected world, it's a superpower. This lecture will show you what CQ is, how it works, and how to use it with real-world case studies. Here's a question. Why do some of the smartest, most experienced professionals completely fail when they step into a different culture? They have the technical skills, they have the credentials, but something goes wrong. The answer is that technical expertise doesn't automatically translate across cultural boundaries. What works in one country can offend in another. What seems like common sense in one culture can be completely confusing somewhere else. That's where cultural intelligence comes in. CQ is the missing piece that separates professionals who struggle abroad from those who thrive. And the good news is, it's a skill you can learn. Let's start with the basics. Culture is the set of values, norms, and customs that a group of people share. It's the invisible software that runs in the background of every interaction. Cultural intelligence, or CQ, is an outsider's ability to interpret someone's unfamiliar and ambiguous gestures the same way that person's compatriots would. In plain English, it means you can read a situation correctly, even when the cultural rules are different from your own. The source material gives us 3 goals for improving CQ. First, become aware of your own cultural biases. Second, respect and value cultural differences. And third, adapt your behavior to accommodate those differences. Notice that none of these goals say abandon your own culture. The point isn't to become someone else, it's to build a bridge. When you enter a new culture, you typically go through 4 phases. First is the honeymoon phase. Everything is exciting and new. The food is interesting. The customs are charming. Then comes frustration. The differences stop feeling charming and start feeling exhausting. Simple tasks become difficult. You might feel angry, homesick, or isolated. Phase 3 is adjustment. You start to understand the patterns. You learn how things actually work. The frustration eases as you build competence. Finally, acceptance. You don't have to love everything about the new culture, but you accept it on its own terms. You can function effectively. Here's the key insight. Culture shock isn't a shock of weakness. It's a normal learning process. And CQ is what helps you move through these phases faster. CQ isn't one single thing. It's made up of 4 distinct components, and each one plays a different role. First is cognitive CQ. This is your knowledge about another culture. What are their customs? What's their history? What do they value? This is the textbook knowledge you can study before you ever set foot in a new country. Second is metacognitive CQ. This is your awareness of how culture affects interactions in real time. It's the ability to step back and think, wait, is this misunderstanding happening because of a cultural difference? And then strategize accordingly. Third is behavioral CQ. This is your ability to adjust your visible behavior so that people from the other culture can read you correctly. It's not about mimicking, it's about communicating clearly in a way the other person understands. And fourth is motivational CQ. This is the emotional resilience and genuine desire to adapt. Because let's be honest, adapting is hard. It's uncomfortable. Motivational CQ is what keeps you going when it would be easier to give up. Let's see CQ in action with a real case study. A global manufacturing company with over $45 billion in annual revenue was operating in China. They had a serious problem. Their compliance incident rate was 23%, and they were spending nearly $5 million a year on remediation costs. The root cause wasn't a lack of rules, it was a cultural disconnect. Their Western-centric compliance training didn't resonate with local employees. It didn't account for guanxi, the relationship-based trust system that's central to Chinese business culture. So they implemented a CQ framework. They trained executives in cultural intelligence. They mapped guanxi networks. They developed culturally sensitive protocols for gift giving and relationship building. The results were dramatic. Compliance incidents dropped by 78%. Regulatory approval times improved by 73%. And their China revenue grew by 145% over 18 months. This is what CQ looks like in practice. It's not abstract theory. It directly impacts the bottom line. One of the most important cultural dimensions is power distance. This is the extent to which members of a culture accept and expect that power is distributed unequally. In low power distance cultures like Denmark or the Netherlands, hierarchy is flat. Employees expect to be consulted. They feel comfortable challenging their boss. In high power distance cultures like China, Malaysia, or the Philippines, hierarchy is respected. Decisions come from the top, and questioning a superior can feel disrespectful. Here's a powerful real-world example. In 2014, the Chinese company Fuyao Glass acquired a General Motors factory in Ohio. The Chinese management team operated with high power distance expectations. They expected workers to follow instructions without debate. The American workforce, used to low power distance norms, expected open dialogue and the right to question decisions. The clash was severe. American employees felt disrespected and alienated. There were strikes, morale plummeted, turnover was high, production targets were missed. This wasn't about bad people on either side. It was a cultural mismatch that nobody had prepared for. CQ would have helped both sides understand that the other wasn't being difficult. They were just operating with different assumptions about authority. Another major cultural difference is how people think about time. Monochronic cultures, common in Germany, the US, and Northern Europe, treat time in absolute terms. Time is linear. You focus on one task at a time. Punctuality is a sign of respect. Deadlines are firm commitments. Polychronic cultures, common in Latin America, the Middle East, and Africa, see time as flexible and relative. Relationships take priority over schedules. It's normal to juggle several tasks at once. Being a few minutes late isn't a sign of disrespect. Here's a real example. German professionals working in a factory in Honduras complained that local workers arrived 30 minutes late every day. The Honduran workers saw nothing wrong. They were present and working. But the Germans saw it as a professional failure. Neither side was wrong. They were operating with completely different assumptions about what punctuality means. CQ helps you recognize that difference before you label someone as lazy or rude. Another key cultural dimension is uncertainty avoidance. This is the degree to which a culture tries to avoid uncertainty and ambiguity. High uncertainty avoidance cultures, like Japan, Greece, and Portugal, prefer clear rules, structured environments, and predictable outcomes. They tend to have detailed contracts, extensive planning, and a low tolerance for unconventional behavior. Low uncertainty avoidance cultures, like Singapore, Denmark, and the United States, are more comfortable with ambiguity. They're more willing to take risks, challenge authority, and accept that not everything can be planned in advance. Here's how this plays out in practice. A Danish manager working with a Japanese team might propose a flexible project timeline with room for iteration. The Japanese team might find this deeply uncomfortable. They prefer a detailed, fixed schedule with clear milestones. The Danish manager sees flexibility as empowering. The Japanese team sees it as risky and unprofessional. Neither approach is wrong. They're just different strategies for dealing with the same fundamental uncertainty that every business faces. CQ helps you recognize which approach your team needs. Cultures also differ in how people think and build trust. Applications first thinkers want actionable information first. They care more about how things work than why. Principles first thinkers prefer to establish a general theory first, then apply it. Both are valid approaches, but they can cause friction when a principles first manager tries to explain the theory to an applications first team member who just wants to know what to do. Pieces doubly. There's also a distinction between specific thinkers and applications first and principles first. Specific thinkers analyze a problem by isolating it from its environment. Holistic thinkers consider the broader context and connections. And then there's trust. In relationship-based trust cultures like China and Brazil, personal relationships are the foundation of business. You don't do business with someone until you know them as a person. In task-based trust cultures like the US and Germany, trust is built through demonstrated competence and reliability. The Nestlé case study illustrates this perfectly. When Carl Morel tried to negotiate a joint venture in Shanghai, his team focused on providing detailed data and technical information. The Chinese executives remained impenetrable. Only when Morel shifted to building personal relationships through dinners and social time did the deal move forward. The lesson is clear. Trust doesn't mean the same thing everywhere. Let's revisit the Nestlé case in more detail, because it's such a perfect illustration of how trust works differently across cultures. Carl Morel was an acquisitions expert at Nestlé. He was negotiating a joint venture in Shanghai with a company that made packaged Chinese delicacies. His team did everything right by Western standards. They prepared detailed data. They were transparent. They shared technical information freely. But the Chinese executives remained impenetrable. They wouldn't budge. A week of meetings went nowhere. Morel was frustrated. A local consultant gave him a crucial piece of advice. He was going too fast. He needed to stop focusing on the deal and start focusing on building guanxi, the personal relationship network that underpins Chinese business. So Morel changed his approach. He organized dinners with live music. He spent time getting to know the executives personally. He opened up about his own background and interests. The shift was remarkable. When meetings resumed the following Monday, the Chinese team was significantly more cooperative. The deal moved forward. The lesson is profound. In task-based trust cultures, you build trust by demonstrating competence. In relationship-based trust cultures, you build trust by demonstrating that you're a good person worth knowing. Morel didn't change his technical skills. He changed his approach to trust. That's CQ. Communication style is one of the most visible cultural differences. In low-context cultures like the United States and Germany, meaning is contained directly in the words. If you want to say no, you say no. If you have a problem, you state it clearly. In high-context cultures, like Japan and many Arab countries, much of the meaning is conveyed without words, through tone of voice, body language, silence, and what's left unsaid. Here's a real example from the tech industry. A Japanese field engineer asked an American engineer to test a prototype chip. The American tested it under specific conditions, found it worked, and reported no problem. The Japanese engineer was frustrated. He expected the American to proactively explain the testing variables and provide broader context. The American felt the request was unclear. The Japanese engineer felt the response was insufficient. This is a classic high context versus low context breakdown. The American thought the task was complete. The Japanese engineer thought the American was being careless. Neither was right or wrong. They just had different expectations about how much information needed to be explicitly stated. Feedback styles also vary dramatically across cultures. Confrontational cultures like the Netherlands and Israel get right to the point. They use upgraders like very or extremely. Disagreement is seen as a healthy part of finding the best solution. Non-confrontational cultures like Japan and Thailand often sandwich criticism with agreement or praise. They use downgraders like somewhat or a little. Preserving harmony and saving face is more important than being direct. In Japanese business culture, there's a concept called tatemae, the public-facing agreeable position, versus hane, your true opinion. A Japanese colleague might say, "Well, consider it," when they actually mean no. An American might interpret that as a maybe and follow up repeatedly, causing frustration on both sides. Decision-making follows similar patterns. Some cultures value consensus. Decisions only happen when everyone agrees. Others value top-down decision-making. The leader decides and everyone supports it. There's also a distinction between little d decisions, which are made quickly but subject to change, and capital D decisions, which are painstakingly planned but final. Understanding which type of decision you're facing can prevent enormous frustration. So, how do you actually lead across cultures? The source material gives us 3 practical strategies. First, explicitly describe the group norms. Don't assume everyone shares the same expectations about meetings, deadlines, or communication. State them clearly. Second, explain your reasoning. When you introduce a norm that might feel strange to some team members, explain why it exists. This builds understanding instead of resentment. Third, acknowledge the discomfort. Say something like, "I know this might feel unusual, and that's okay. Here's why we're doing it this way." When conflicts arise, encourage team members to look for cultural explanations first. Ask, could this be a cultural difference rather than a personal issue? Try changing the group structure to accommodate different styles. And if all else fails, you may need to remove a team member who simply cannot work across the cultural divide. But that should be the last resort, not the first. Here's a cautionary tale about what happens when CQ is missing. Mitsubishi launched a vehicle called the Pajero. In most of the world, that's just a name, but in Spanish-speaking countries, Pajero is a vulgar slang term. Now, Mitsubishi could have ignored the problem. They could have insisted that the name was fine and everyone else was being oversensitive. Instead, they demonstrated CQ strategy. They recognized the cultural issue, planned ahead, and renamed the vehicle Montero for those markets. This seems obvious in hindsight, but it's a perfect example of why cultural vetting matters. A simple translation check wouldn't have caught it. You need someone who understands the cultural subtext. That's CQ in action. And it saved Mitsubishi from a massive reputational disaster. Let's look at another real case study that shows CQ in action. An IT company with call centers in India and the Philippines was struggling. Middle and senior level managers were having difficulty interacting with culturally diverse global customers. Customer satisfaction scores were stagnating. The root cause wasn't technical skill. The managers were technically excellent. The problem was that they were applying the same communication and problem-solving approach to every customer, regardless of cultural background. The company implemented a CQ leadership development program. Managers learn to recognize cultural patterns in customer behavior. They learn to adjust their communication style based on whether the customer was from a low context or high context culture. They learned when to be direct and when to be indirect. The result was a 20% increase in customer satisfaction scores. Not because the managers worked harder, but because they worked smarter. They stopped treating every customer the same and started adapting to cultural expectations. This case proves something important. CQ isn't just for executives negotiating billion-dollar deals. It works at every level of an organization, from the call center to the boardroom. Let's bring everything together. Cultural intelligence is the ability to interpret unfamiliar behavior the way locals would. It's built on 4 components: knowledge, awareness, behavior, and motivation. Cultures differ across several key dimensions. Power distance shapes how authority works. Time orientation shapes how deadlines feel. Communication style shapes how messages land. Trust style shapes how relationships form. And feedback style shapes how criticism is received. The case studies we've seen prove that CQ isn't academic theory. The manufacturing company in China saved millions. Fuyao Glass could have avoided strikes. Nestle unlocked a deal by building relationships first. Mitsubishi avoided a PR disaster. The bottom line is this: in a globalized world, technical skills alone aren't enough. CQ is what separates professionals who struggle across cultures from those who thrive. And the best part is, it's a skill you can develop starting today. Start by noticing your own cultural assumptions. Then learn about one culture different from your own. And the next time you encounter a behavior that seems strange or frustrating, pause and ask yourself, is this a cultural difference? That single question is the beginning of cultural intelligence.